Contagion. Fever. Sickness. Outbreak. Death. The 1900s had just begun, and the New York Health Department was already busy fighting disease and improving the level of sanitation on the streets. The crowded city was the perfect breeding ground for many contagious viruses and bacteria that easily spread from person to person. Department officials had to be skilled enough to recognize and prevent diseases such as tuberculosis, malaria, and typhoid from taking over. George Soper, an epidemiologist, was one of these health department officials. Soper's 1906 exploration of a typhoid outbreak in Oyster Bay resulted in the apprehension and quarantine of Mary Mallon, preventing new cases of the disease from appearing in New York. Media coverage of this event prompted the development of stricter sanitation regulations in restaurants, improving the screening process for potential employees throughout the United States. Soper's first encounter with typhoid occurred in Ithaca, New York in 1903. It had appeared and spread across the campus of Cornell University, and Soper was called in to find the source and stop it. By the time he arrived, 600 students, faculty members, and general people of the community had perished. Typhoid targets only the human bloodstream, causing fevers and other symptoms including rashes, headaches, and constipation. It was easy for typhoid to spread in places such as the kitchen and the bathroom, prompting the need for strict observation and sanitation in those areas. Using this information as a guide, Soper was able to track the source of the Ithaca outbreak to the town water supply.
In 1900, people understood about bacteria and they understood about how that thing happened. The infrastructure to deal with it properly just wasn't there yet.
When another case of typhoid appeared in Oyster Bay, his experience and perseverance made him the ideal epidemiologist for the job. A New York banker by the name of General William Henry Warren had decided to take his family to the East Coast to vacation on the shores of Oyster Bay. It was a popular destination among upper-class New Yorkers, and therefore had high standards for sanitation and cleanliness. Shortly after the family's arrival, Warren's daughter grew ill. It was typhoid, and the source of the outbreak was unclear. Soper took the same steps to approach the situation as he had in Ithaca, thinking that the two cases would be very similar. None of the normal causes produced any leads.
Finally, he asked the question of one of the members of the household, who else was in this house that I didn't yet talk to? And one of them remembered that they'd had a cook that summer.
Who was this mysterious cook that fled the scene the first sign of trouble? She was none other than the infamous Irish carrier, Mary Mallon. As a cook, Mallon came into contact with food on a daily basis, making it easier for her to spread contagious diseases to her employers. However, Mallon claimed that she had never even been sick with the typhoid disease. Soper doubted her innocence. He had uncovered a trail of typhoid outbreaks, all of which had one thing in common: Mallon. The first trace of typhoid fever came in 1900. In 1902 in Dark Harbor, Maine, a severe case of typhoid devastated another family. 2 years after that, in 1904, 4 people were infected after 3 weeks of Mallon's employment. 2 more years passed, and in 1906, another laundress from Tuxedo, New York, took ill. Soper had heard of people who showed no symptoms of a disease, but were able to spread it anyway. These people were called carriers. Even if a carrier kept clean, it would take a vigorous amount of scrubbing to completely remove disease germs. Because Mallon handled both cooked and uncooked food multiple times a day, it would be easy for her to transmit the disease to her employers. All Soper had to do was track her down and, with her permission, test samples of her feces, urine, and blood. Soper decided to be straightforward and visit Mallon at her place of employment to ask her for the samples. He explained his theory about her role as a carrier. However, Mallon instead felt threatened and insulted, refusing to cooperate. Brandishing a carving fork, she chased Soper out of the kitchen, leaving him without any evidence that could help him solve the case. There was no other explanation for the typhoid epidemic at the Oyster Bay house. Mallon had to be the cause. Hoping that the presence of a female would prompt Mallon to open up, Soper asked Dr. Josephine Baker to help him collect the samples. Baker brought 3 policemen to Mallon's new place of employment, where they were able to take a protesting Mary Mallon into custody. The fact that the health department had to call in police reinforcements grabbed media attention right away. However, Soper and his colleagues did not want Mallon's story to go public. The health department gave the press small details about Mallon, calling her by a false name. Meanwhile, Mallon's samples were tested for typhoid, and the results came back positive. She was, in fact, a healthy typhoid carrier. It was impossible for the health department to keep this case under wraps any longer. As more and more information about carriers was uncovered, the public needed to be informed about the new threat. Mallon was not trying to keep quiet either. She had recently been quarantined on North Brother Island in the East River, and she wanted her freedom.
They didn't really know what else to do with her. And of course, this was pre-antibiotics, so it's not like they could have, treated her with antibiotics and eradicated her carriage like we could nowadays.
Of course, the press was once again instrumental in spreading news of Mallon's fight throughout the country. Woman typhoid factory held as prisoner. Has New York many walking pest houses? Which in New York? Headings like these were common at newsstands, and the nickname Typhoid Mary soon sparked an in-depth discussion across America about sanitary practices and the treatment of disease. The papers were instrumental in revealing all the hidden health dangers within restaurants and kitchens. They spread the word and raised awareness of common health issues in popular hangouts and destinations. Even with all of the media attention, however, the health department never released Mallon from quarantine. Soper's involvement with Mallon's case raised American awareness about the sanitary practices surrounding the city of New York, prompting him and the health department to begin major sanitary reform in the city. New employees endured an improved and more thorough screening process before they were hired, and once employed, they were expected to submit to routine testing that would make sure that they weren't harboring contagious diseases. Kitchen practices especially were re-examined, and updated policies were put in place, the most popular of which being the rule that employees must wash their hands before returning to work. In addition, workspaces had to be thoroughly sanitized, and food must have been kept labeled and separated. Most of these policies are still in place today, and have been improved upon as the food industry has grown and developed. If George Soper had not stopped Mary Mallon, she would unknowingly have spread the typhoid disease around the entire state of New York. After reading about Mallon's case in the paper, Americans opened their eyes and their minds to improve the level of sanitation in popular establishments across the country. Without this heightened level of awareness, many of the rules and regulations that we follow today would never have been created or enforced.